In 1941, the Luftwaffe received orders for a bombing run targeting the city of Belfast. The city would come to suffer destruction and death to a point unheard of in its history.
You weren't even supposed to light a cigarette outside because, again, it would show that there was a human being there and that human being could be bombed.
80 years on from the Blitz, and the number of people who can tell its story is rapidly shrinking.
There will come a time in the next few years when those first-hand stories will no longer be available to us.
Institutions such as the War Memorial Museum are in a race against time to preserve these memories before they disappear forever.
So I think it's really important to be capturing those because obviously it is passing out of living memory, and it's important to get them while we still can.
So how can museums preserve these voices, and what do those who remember the Blitz have to say?
We realised that this was serious. This was war with a capital W.
In Belfast's Cathedral Quarter, the Northern Irish War Memorial Museum has been engaging with some projects designed to digitise some of the history of Northern Ireland during World War II.
So my name is Michael Fryer and I'm museum manager at the Northern Ireland War Memorial. I suppose the two main stories that we tell at the museum would be in terms of the Belfast Blitz, so the 4 German air raids on Belfast, and also Newtownards and Derry, Londonderry and Bangor in April and May 1941, and also the American presence, so the 300,000 Americans who came to Northern Ireland during the Second World War. So altogether we have about 6,000 objects and artefacts in our collection, all of which have a connection to the Second World War.
Within the museum space, remembrance continues, but in varied forms. A digital display shows the names of victims during the air raids, but 2 physical books offer a more intimate look through history.
So these are our books of remembrance for the First and Second World Wars. This lists everybody that was killed from Northern Ireland. Turn them every day to a different page, just to make sure that everyone is sort of being remembered. And we have a number of people that come into the gallery and want to see their relative's name and sort of just make sure that they're still being remembered.
While the museum's digital displays bring history to life in new ways, they're still deeply rooted in the voices of those who lived through the war itself. Among the most powerful contributors, Doreen McBride adds a human dimension to this technology.
Right, okay. I'll try and keep my face straight. Are you ready? The first night of the Blitz, there were only, I think, 4 planes, and it didn't last very long. And the only thing that was, well, the shipyard was badly hit, and so was round about the waterworks. And I remember that we were very pleased that the waterworks were hit because we thought Hitler was stupid and he'd mistaken the waterworks for the shipyard and the docks. But in retrospect, after the war, it was suggested that his notes or the records of that particular time, that Hitler thought that if he knocked out the waterworks, when they came and bombed the place properly, he wouldn't be able to put the flames out. The second Blitz was simply terrible. I think it was 200 bombers came and bombed the city for 8 hours. And I remember the whole house shaking and screaming, and Mum screaming. We sort of held on to each other, waiting for the house to fall down around us, but nothing happened. And then she opened the door of the cubbyhole that we were in, and the hall was all right. And she turned to me and she said, "There's nothing wrong here, it looks absolutely fine." And then she said, "God help those people who've actually been in the middle of it."
On the 15th of April, 200 Luftwaffe bombers unleashed their destructive force on Belfast, causing a loss of 987 lives, the injury of 1,500 people, and the immense destruction of manufacturing hubs as well as homes. This would mark the Belfast Blitz as the second deadliest raid for the United Kingdom throughout the war outside of the London Blitz.
There were 2,000 people made homeless in Belfast, and nearly 1,000 were killed. And as it was a small population, it affected everybody. Everybody knew somebody who had been affected in some way or other.
As the distance between present day and World War II grows, fewer living people can give first-hand accounts of the war and its effects, a reality which means the way the war is taught, learned and engaged with has to evolve.
Well, I always think when I was young and when I was learning about the Second World War in school, I could ask my grandparents about it because they had memories, first-hand accounts. But obviously the kids today, they don't have that personal connection. Their grandparents are only in their 60s, 70s. They don't have those personal memories. And so I feel like I'm going around interviewing everybody else's grannies to capture those memories so they can listen to them in the future. So I think it's really important to be capturing those because obviously it is passing out of living memory. And it's important to get them while we still can.
Having a digital presence goes beyond archives. A website, social media, and online exhibits all play a part in getting people interested in World War II and even visiting the museum.
Any museum will only have a certain amount of space to put on display some of their collection. So we're always conscious that we want to let the public know that, as I say, there's a huge variety of objects in our collection, and we also run an oral history project. So as much as we have a physical collection, we also have a collection of oral history. And in many cases as well, family members have very kindly donated photographs of those people. So you can actually now visit the website and see the photographs and faces of those people, which we think is very important. We want to, I suppose, just as a way of public access, try to digitize some of those as well and make those available, for example, on our website.
As the distance between the present and World War II increases, the amount of those who can remember the events clearly themselves dwindle. But memories, so traumatic, run deep and are not so easily forgotten.
Oh, what frightened me was planes. I'd forgotten about that. It was planes going overhead. Frightened me, scared the living daylights out of me, until we went to live behind Thiepval Barracks in the flight path of the helicopters. And I would waken up every night if a plane or a helicopter was flying over, and I'd be out in a cold sweat or even a hot sweat and terrified. And it took about a year for me to realise that the helicopters were not going to do me any harm.
We've got about 3,000 school kids come in every year to learn about the Second World War because it is on the curriculum, and they tend to be sort of around P4 age. So I think it's really important to be capturing those because obviously it is passing out of living memory, and it's important to get them while we still can.
So you feel kind of like a race against time almost?
It does. Every time sort of I'm interacting with a board member or something, they're like, oh, you're still doing some interviews, you still have enough people to interview. But I mean, we've been doing about 50 or 60 a year and it still hasn't quietened down.
Digitising exhibits isn't without challenges, and the museum faces a lot of pressure to handle these processes within its staff.
It would probably fall to our collections officer to digitise most of our collection, and that's a huge process. There's a backlog in terms of what we already have and what needs to be added to our collections management system. So there's a huge amount of admin involved in that, and then even before that, then being able to get, or even after that, being able to get to the process of digitising objects in our collection. There's only a very small minority of our collection, which I mentioned is nearly 6,000 objects. So to be able to digitize those is a huge process.
I think we're not really sure when the project itself, as in collecting the voices, will end, but the idea is that those are preserved forever and ever in perpetuity. I mean, even if, say, in 100 years the War Memorial closes, for whatever reason, those oral histories would be deposited in somewhere like the British Library or the National Museum of Northern Ireland. They're not going to go anywhere. Now that we've collected them, we're very keen to obviously make sure that they have that longevity and they're going to be there and accessible to historians or anyone who wants to hear these voices.
Well, I think history is part of our past. You learn from the past. And also, if you know the history of a place, it adds richness to it. So you can go and say, this is where such and such a thing happened. And it's very important. It's our heritage. And if you're not aware of your heritage, you're not really aware of your roots.